Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Students of the Word. This is session number 100. It's session number 100, and we're not quite to the end of the epistle. There are 100 verses in First John, so I have to admit, I kind of suspected we might get to the end by saying it's episode 100, but not quite, actually, and that's perfectly fine. I think we're on a pretty blistering pace. And in fact, I'm going to take a little bit of a gamble tonight by going back a little bit because I'm trying to follow this passage, the business with the water and the blood and everything and whatever it is John is exactly doing with his prepositions here and his sentence structure. And this is the weirdest paragraph. I think this is the hardest to understand. I don't mean hardest to get. I mean, just like the hardest to parse, like the hardest to comprehend, like to figure out exactly even what he's saying. So I don't mind spending a little time here. So let's jump back ahead. Where were we? Paragraph 17, is it? Okay. I'll read through where we are. Okay. It's the end of it the end of verse 8 that I want to sort out. Okay. Who is the one who overcomes the world? But he who believes that Jesus is the Son of God. This is the one who came by water and blood, Jesus Christ, not with the water only, or not in water only, but in water and in blood. It is the Spirit who bears witness, who testifies, because the Spirit, the breathing, the breath is the truth. For there are three that testify. You know what? Never mind. I'm going to skip the English because remember, we looked at this. The English is doing all kinds of weird things. That is, the English is trying to make it readable, and God bless them for doing so because John's Greek is really, really hard here. So let's go back to the Greek here. Okay. Starting at the beginning of the paragraph, just to remind ourselves of where we're going and what's going on here. Who now is the vanquishing the world one, if not the believing that Jesus is the Son of God one? This is the having come by water and blood, Jesus Christ. Not in water only, but in water and in blood. And then we talked about that, the baptism thing. And the breath is the testifying one. Hoti, in that, ta pneuma estin he aletheia. The Spirit is the truth. The breath is the truth. The breath is the testifying one, in that the breath is the truth. Okay, well, it sounds like a good one to testify then, isn't it? Hoti. In that three there are bearing testimony. And then we've got the fun little add-on, which we'll skip. Okay, so let me go back to where we were. In that three, there are bearing testimony. The Spirit, the breath, and the water, and the blood. And these three are in one. Ice. That's the into, but it's not exactly into, motion towards. They're coming into one. These three are in one. And all the English translations say they're in agreement, which seems like where we're going. And thinking syntactically here, we were thinking this is all one sentence, right? That's what we were looking at last time. Sorry, in real world time, it's been the entire holidays since we did this last. So I want to make sure I'm getting the conclusions we came to at the end in our head so that we can move forward with those. It seems I agree with this period here. Starting the sentence with Kai is just what John likes to do. And the Spirit is the testifying one, in that the Spirit is the truth, hoti, in that that's the period I disagree with, because he doesn't usually start his sentences with hoti. Um, right. In that the Spirit, the breath is the truth, in that there are three bearing testimony. So he's the two hoti clauses are like parallel here. The Spirit is the testifying one. Hoti to pneuma estin he aletheia, hoti tres eisin ho martyrunes, martyrutes. The Spirit is the one testifying, in that the Spirit is the truth, in that there are three bearing witness. There are three testifying. And we looked before at how you've got what sounds like a contradiction. The Spirit is testifying. Oh, but there are actually three that testify. And in the middle of it, you've got the Spirit is the truth. The Spirit and the water and the blood. Kai hoi tres. And these three are in one. Yes. Yeah, Scott, it's a really good question. Scott says, are they one in their testimony? That's what the English translators all seem to be suggesting, right? By using the word agreement, which appears nowhere in the Greek, right? They're extrapolating the word agreement because they're interpreting that what John means when he says the three are in one, he means that their testimony is in one, right? They all have the same testimony. Their testimony all agrees with each other. But Scott, your question, are they joined in some other way? Right? That's not really clear. I mean, one could think, as our early medieval commentator here, right, in the second half of verse 6 or verse 7 here, this, what was it, 4th century edition? This highly Trinitarian edition, right? In heaven, the Father, the Word, and the Holy Spirit, and these three are one. He seemed to believe that that's what this passage was about, right? And so, Scott, I assume that that's how he, our 4th century commentator there, was reading verse 8. The Spirit and the water and the blood, and these three are in one. That it's pointing to something. However, our 4th century commentator felt that it didn't stand on its own, right? It wanted to make it a little bit more explicit. Yes, Susan, I agree. The scribe was clearly unsure what John was saying. Yes. But it sounded kind of Trinitarian, right? The three are in one. So he's like, okay, let me inject some clarity into this, right? Yeah. But let's think back for a second. The water and the blood. I was suggesting, and you'll remember my diffidence about this because it involves, appealing to things outside the text, which makes me a little bit uncomfortable. But I think with the reference to the breathing and everything, and the breathing bearing witness and being the truth, that I feel on relatively safe ground in drawing the connection with the water to Jesus's baptism, the beginning of Jesus's ministry, when the Spirit descends upon him, when the voice of God speaks, declaring him to be his beloved Son in whom he is well pleased. Both of those things. And again, those things being identified together. That is the word of God and the breath of God. As, of course, one does connect the breath with the words. Um, the breath and the words are one in a sense, right? So, but I was arguing my best reading, and I am not at all sure, I'm not at all confident that I understand it fully, what is going on with this in the water and in the blood thing. But the best clue, the thing that makes most sense to me, and this was now a couple sessions ago that we talked about this, was Randall, when you were talking about the preposition in being connected with water baptism in the waters, that's a standard baptismal phrase in New Testament Greek, and in early Christian Greek, and that seems to me to really fit here. I can't see what water is relevant if not the water of baptism. Which one was it? The Message, one of them, wanted to connect it explicitly to the water that came out of Jesus' side, water and blood that came out of Jesus' side, and it's possible. But the if that phrase into hudati, in the water, not in the water only, that sounds like a setup. Like he's using that phrase, that baptismal phrase. He's came by means of the water and the blood. Remember dia in that context. It's like, again, my favorite parallel there was God speaking through the prophets. Jesus is having come through water and blood. That is like the water and the blood testify to him, right? Just like the prophets testify to God, the prophets bear witness of God. They speak on God's behalf, right? God speaks through them. So Jesus came through the water and the blood. In what sense? Not into hudate, not in the water only, not just in his baptism, but into haimati. And it's my argument that into haimati is a wordplay, that he's taking the familiar phrase into hudate, in the water, and he's using the unfamiliar phrase in the blood. Like, what does that mean? It's a wordplay on into hudati, which in this context is very, very close. Like it sounds almost exactly the same. Not in the water only, but in the blood. Jesus's nature, Jesus's identity, Jesus's ministry was testified to at his baptism in the Jordan. And his ministry, his sacrifice, was testified to in his blood at his crucifixion. And so in this way, he came dia, hudatos, kai, haimatos, through water and blood, just like God speaks through the prophets. So Jesus's ministry was declared through the water and the blood, through the baptism and the crucifixion, the beginning and the end of his public ministry. And he emphasizes not in water only, not through the baptism only, but in the blood, in the baptism, in the water and in the blood, in the baptism and in the crucifixion. And the breath is the testifying one, because the breath is the truth. In that there are three bearing witness, the breath and the water and the blood. So you see, it comes back to the testimony again. The testimony of the spirit, of the breath at the baptism was clear. The testimony of the ceremony of the baptism, right, through Jesus's baptism, and of the blood, his death and sacrifice. And these three are eis tohen, are in one, brought together in one, come together in one. Ice, that's the, it's not in, it's not N, it's not his favorite preposition, right? It's ice, which is like into, it's more of a motion preposition, right? The three have come together in one. And we do move from here, Scott, as you were just mentioning, to more of the testimony stuff. And this is where Marta Roman. So I want to be consistent. I'm going to use bearing witness because it's my favorite. Um, I'm trying to think of, I want to be consistent, just like I'm trying to be consistent in using vanquished for the Nike verb. Um, I want to be consistent and testify. I guess I could use testify and testimony because it is a courtroom word, and that seems relevant to what John's been doing and what John's been talking about. Okay. Besides, it's a single word, so that's always better, I guess. And I shouldn't complain because, unlike with vanquish, we have an easy noun and verb form, just like I wanted with vanquish. Vanquishment being a little bit awkward. Um, so, um, so yeah, and I agree, Scott. We've been in courtroom mode for a long time. Okay, I ten martyran. Huh. 10. That's just accusative. It's just an okay. All right. 10. Gotcha. Feminine accusative singular. All right. If 10 martyrian, if the testimony of anthropon, of men, of people, we receive the testimony of God, martyria to theou, estin maison, is greater. That's the same word as we had. It was that God is greater than our minds, right? Before, remember if our minds were knowing against us, God was greater than our minds. Um. Okay. God's testimony is greater than the testimony of men. Okay. First, let's look at the verb. I want to understand lambano a little bit better. Okay, so uh huh. So the person who takes away your shirt is lambanoing it. Okay. Oh, he that asks receives. He himself took our infirmities. Matthew quoting Isaiah. Okay. Freely you've received, freely give. Okay. He who does not take his cross and follow me. Oh, that's interesting. So you're receiving the cross. Interesting. Um, oh, noted about the article, Randall. I always appreciate help with that. We'll come back with that in a second. Sorry, I'm just distracted for a second by he that receives not his cross. You know, the use of the verb take in the English translation, oh, everybody translates that take. You just take up his cross. Usually take it up, right? Um, receive is quite different. Wow. Okay, right. You receive a prophet's reward. You receive a righteous man receives a righteous man's reward. Oh, they received a counsel like the Pharisees. Oh, never mind. I won't even get distracted by it. But that's really interesting. I suspect that has something to do with how they thought about councils. Oh, interesting. The taking. He took the 5 loaves. He received them. Okay. So it's just somebody hands you something and you take it. It's not meet to receive the children's bread. Okay, well, hang on. That's it's not meet to take the children's bread and feed it to the dogs. So that's you're not receiving it. Children aren't giving it to you. You're taking it away from them. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it does seem to cover both the active take and the passive receive. Huh. How do you know which is which? Because conceivably, those are quite different. Like, is it something that's handed to you? Wow. That's really interesting. So basically, that's, am I to understand that that's a distinction that we make in English that in Greek they just didn't care about the difference? Basically, they have the same word. I mean, goodness knows we have enough words like that, right? Like no, right? We've been talking about, you know, idoike and gnosko and or oidate, sorry, and gnosko. And as those two verbs for no, and we just have the one verb, in English, like we don't even care about the difference between those two kinds of knowing. Um, so, you know, our own usage has plenty of blind spots like this, but this seems to me to be that kind of a blind spot. I mean, if sure you can understand from context, but it suggests like if they're just using the same word. Like they're not really making a huge distinction of what feels to me like a big deal. All right, I want to peek ahead at um dude, what are you doing? Um, okay. What is this? No, I can't look at my occurrences. That's not what I want. Oh well. Um, my concordance is not behaving. Okay. Um, well, interesting. So I won't lean on that distinction then. But I'm trying to think about because I mean, there are some situations where this is a major distinction, like to take the children's bread and give it to the dogs, right? Where you're actually like depriving someone of something, which is the opposite of just receiving it, right? Um, and or the Isaiah quote, he himself took our infirmities. Yes, you could say he received them, but not passively, right? He took them away. Yeah, it does seem, I mean, Um, I agree, Randall, that the basic meaning seems to be that something comes into your hands. Like first you don't have something and then you do, right? Like in your hands, right? First you're not holding something and then you are. That certainly does seem to be the one concept that all of these usages have in common. Um, but not to make the distinction between receiving something that is being placed in your hands and grabbing something, even something that belongs to somebody else and taking it away from them inappropriately, as again is the case with the taking the children's bread and giving it unto dogs. Um, that feels like such an important semantic distinction, and it's just fascinating to me that they just don't care. Wow, I don't know that it's necessarily relevant because we're talking about taking. taking the testimony of men, but wow, and it's a puzzle to me. Okay, language is so weird. Okay, I mean, like all languages are weird because people are weird at the end of the day. Okay, um, yeah, that's right, Randall. Randall's reminding me of when we encountered a similar lack of distinction with erkomai, the coming, going verb. It can mean come or go. It just seems to mean to change place without a clear distinction of direction. You can use it about coming or going, um, just moving, right? And that, yeah, this seems to be kind of similar. Okay, Randall, I have a theory. My theory is English does not use, we don't even have a middle voice, and we don't like, they use passive and active structures much more like persistently than we do. Um, I wonder if that has to do with it. Because ultimately, it's a difference between active and passive taking, right? Taking and receiving. And in Greek is the situation that they're like, what matters is something is coming into your hands. We're going to use the passive voice because we do that in Greek, right? Like we can make a distinction as to how it came into your hands, um, based on the context and combined with the voice of the verb. Whereas in English, we don't use the voices nearly so much, and so we rely upon different verbs instead of like we just anyway. There's my little linguistic theory. Okay, but never mind. If the testimony of men we receive. Now, Randall, coming back to your observation before. So Randall was saying ton here, the definite article, suggests that anthropon doesn't just mean like if we receive the testimony of those dudes, right? But rather of the men, like of mankind, that the definite article suggests potentially that we're generalizing here and not just referring to like a particular group of folks. Um, so if we receive, if we take into our hands, whether we're given it or not, uh, the testimony of mankind, of people, let's just say people, because people is vaguer than men. Men sounds like particular people. The testimony of mankind, testimony of people, the testimony of God is greater. This is such a funny kind of elliptical construction, isn't it? That is, the two halves of the sentence don't literally sound like they have anything to do with each other. Like the testimony, like if you flip it around, it you see how little sense it makes, right? The testimony of God is greater if we receive the testimony of men. It's like, what? No. Like, what does the greatness have to do with it? Like, basically, he's skipping a step, right? If we receive the testimony of men, we should receive the testimony of God even more because God is greater and his testimony is greater. And therefore we should take that more than we take the other testimony. Seems to be what he's getting at, he skips that middle step. He doesn't actually say that we should receive or take up the testimony of men. Or sorry, the testimony of God. But he's certainly implying that. If the testimony of men we receive, of man, of people we receive, um, the testimony of God is greater. All right. I want to dig into my zone a little bit. Megas. Mega, we're all familiar with. Okay. So it's just mega, huge, simply amplifying. And it could be in lots, but it's a fairly vague word. They rejoiced with exceeding great joy, with mega joy. They saw a mega light. I see, but here, he shall be called mega in the kingdom of heaven. He should be called great. In what sense? This is the city of the mega king, and mega was its fall. Yeah. Yeah, the house built on the sand fell. Yeah, and mega, great was its fall. There arose a great storm, a mega storm, and then it became mega calm. I love that. That's so great. Uh, so there's an adverbial form here also. Megale. Yeah, this makes the Bible sound cooler. Yeah, it was a mega storm, and then it got mega calm. Yeah, yeah. If all men born of women, there is uh, one more mega than John the Baptizer. There's something more mega than the temple here. Okay. So it's pretty generic. Sometimes it's just amplifying the thing, right? How much light? Mega light. How strong a storm? A mega storm. How calm was it? Super calm, right? Mega calm. Um, it can be used comparatively. He's one who is greater than the temple. John the Baptist being compared to men born of women. O woman, great is thy faith. Speaking of bread being thrown to dogs. It can also be sort of vague, like to be great in the kingdom of heaven, or um, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Greatest in what exact sense? Um, okay. The testimony of God is mega. I mean, God has like mega testimony. It's so what's interesting to me about that is that I can understand, I can understand a light, one light being more mega than another light. I can understand a storm being more mega than another storm. Heck, I can even understand a calm, being more mega than another calm. How is one testimony more mega than another testimony? Exactly. Mega in what dimension? Truer? More reliable? I mean, I can think of some, but John doesn't seem to be suggesting any, uh is my point. Again, I think if we go back to the breath being the truth, we do get aletheia thrown in here. The breath is the testifying one in that the breath is the truth. So I think that's how God's testimony is more mega than human testimony. The breath is the truth. And surely the breath is delivering the testimony of God. See, Again, if you just translate it spirit here and you're thinking about the Holy Spirit as a sort of separate person, and I know doctrine of the Trinity is not technically separate, but I'm not talking about like theology. I'm talking about how it's being discussed in the text here. And what's more, I'm thinking about what John's audience is thinking when he talks about this, because the whole Trinitarian discussion hasn't happened yet, right? So there isn't anybody to whack you on the knuckles if you say that the Spirit is a separate person from God. But you see, you're not really at so much danger of thinking that if what you're hearing is the breath of God. Because when he says up here that the breath is the truth, and then he says down here that the testimony of God is greater, testimony of God is more mega, then it sounds like he's talking about the same thing. Because, of course, how does God testify? Well, with his breath, of course. How does anyone testify? Right? You testify with your breath. And God's breath, the breath, is the truth. And so the testimony of God is the truth. It's the breath that testifies, for the breath is the truth. If we take the testimony of people, the testimony of God, the breath of God is greater. Uh-oh, another dubious period because we're starting with Hoti again. So let's just read through it. If we take the testimony of people, the testimony of God is greater, Hoti, in that this is the testimony of God. Okay, then we're going to say, what is the testimony of God? Okay. This is the testimony of God. Hoti, colon. He has testified. Weird. Why does he repeat the verb? I mean, apart just from the pleasure of saying martyromen again for the 1, 2, 3, 4th time so far in this verse. This is the testimony that he has testified concerning. I mean, he could have gone for the trifecta and been like, this is the testimony that the testator has testified. He does stop one step shy of that. Yes, Susan, I think that's exactly it. He is saying that what God says is truthier. He has testified concerning the Son of him. Peri. Okay, peri. About. Right? Around? Isn't peri like peri? That's like the perimeter word, right? So if you run around something, aren't you going peri something? Yeah, about or around. Yeah. Yeah, so you're going around something. You're going about something. He has testified. Perry. So I bet Perry. You'd use Perry a lot probably for testimony, right? You're sitting in the courtroom waiting to testify, and somebody's like, "What are you here to martyr Roman Perry?" Right? I'm here to martyr Roman Perry, the crime I witnessed or whatever. Okay. Perry, the son of him. Okay, I want to come back to this repetition of the verb of the verb though, because so here's why that strikes me as strange. For this is the testimony of God. Hoti. We've seen this. How many times have we seen this? right? Haute estin. This is the thing. Hoti, right? That's one of John's favorite constructions. But usually what comes after that second hoti is just the thing. He doesn't repeat the verb again. This is the testimony of God. Hoti. Like peri tu huyo, or this is the testimony of God. Instead, it sounds, I guess he's not using that construction. I guess it's just subordinating the testimony of God that he has testified. So he's doubling down on the testimony, on the testifying, because of what he just said. We take the testimony of people. Like that seems to be an actual reference to courtrooms, right? Like the testimony of witnesses is enough to get somebody, convicted or acquitted in a court of law. And if we will take the testimony of people in that way, well, the testimony of God is way more mega. It's way truthier, as Susan says. Way truthier. And given how much truthier the testimony of God is than the testimony of people, this is the testimony that he testified. So he doubles down on it. Noun and verb. It's testimony all the way down. Yeah. So he doubles down on it because he's building off of God's greater testimony. He repeats the word to emphasize God really has testified concerning his son. Sorry, I'm laughing because of course he's doubling down. Not by water only, but by water and by blood. He was doing that doubling before. His testimony that he's testified. There's one who testifies and three who testify. Yes. This is the testimony he has testified concerning the Son of him. But you know what is fascinating? What about the Son of him? Merely the fact of his being his son? Maybe Perry is even a little bit more literal than that. His testimony is around the son. It's around his son, the testimony. It's not just vaguely about him. It's all around him. Everything about him, God has testified to the fact that he's his son and, the other stuff, the water, the blood, the breath. Yes, Jackie, the son is the center. Exactly. Yeah, Karen, I like that. The idea of like his testimony surrounding the son. Yes. He has testified, a testimony is testimony, as Randall says, all around the sun. We receive the testimony of men. God's testimony is way more mega, and his testimony is like all over his son. It's all around him. Right? He just testified the most testimonious testimony all around his son. Surrounding his son with testimony, the testimony that he has testified. Notice the tense there also. We always have to pay attention to tenses. Perfect tense. Mimartereken. He has testified. That's a completed action. That's important again. Remember, we've seen this a lot, using sometimes the perfect tense, sometimes the aorist tense, talking about the thing that happened, the process that has been completed, or the event that occurred. Not just talking about the present. Like this is not God testifies concerning the Son of Him. He's talking about what has happened, what is complete. Because what was the testimony of God? The breath and the water and the blood. And those testimonies are completed. And if I'm right about the water and the blood, thinking of Jesus' baptism and of his crucifixion, that really is Peri the Son, isn't it? All around him, all around his public ministry, the beginning and the end of it. Yeah, that's interesting. Randall says that the perfect tense is less focusing on the action so much as that its effects are still felt. Yes. Yeah, the action is done. It's completed. The point in that way. And that has been the note from the start. Remember, this is the having come through water and blood, Jesus Christ. Elthon. Now that one is aorist, not perfect. That's referring to the coming in the past. Jesus came in the past. God has testified. That's done. But none of these things are about the present or about the future. I mean, they bear on the present and the future, but that's not what he's emphasizing. That is to say, he's not describing God. He's not saying God is currently bearing witness, testifying surrounding the Son. And I'm not saying God isn't or mightn't, but that isn't John's point. He's pointing to what has done. Yes, the aorist would be focusing on the action itself. So the having come is focusing on what Jesus did. Jesus did come. The coming was an event that occurred. But the testimony here, the testimony that he's testified, is about the state that has been brought about by that action. The action of God testifying his particularly mega testimony. Keep going. We're on a roll. Oh, good. I'm glad we're not going to go another sentence without Marta Roman again. Hol pisteuon eis ton huion to theu. The believing in the Son of God one has the testimony in himself. En hauto. Okay, eis, believing eis pisteuon eis. Has that been going on when we've been pisteuing and things? No, we've been pisteuing hoti things, believing that Jesus is the Son of God before. And we're pisteuon hoti in the first one as well. Everyone believing that Jesus is the Christ. Okay. The one trusting, believing, pisteuon, eis into the Son of God, eke possesses the testimony in hauto, in himself. Now, we seem to have come around here fairly explicitly to John now saying again something which suddenly sounds familiar, something that he's been saying. If you believe in the Son of God, you have the testimony in yourself. If you believe in the Son, you have the Father also. And you will be in the Father, and the Father will be in you. Again, these are familiar things, right? The one believing in the Son. Um, Now, ice with the accusative, isn't that the action one? Ice? Isn't that more like into? Not that I really understand what believing into the Son is, but then again, I don't really feel that I fully understand what pisteuon means. Believing. Remember, I've been struggling with this, to believe, to acknowledge, to trust. Um, yeah, definitely into in this case. Generally emphasizing the goal or aim. Yeah. Trusting feels like it works much better. And again, the whole idea of like going ice, ton huyon, into the Son, and then finding that you have the testimony of God, the breath of God in yourself, right? Isn't that kind of like abiding in him and he abides in you? It seems kind of parallel, right? It seems like a different way of saying that exact same thing. That we suddenly find ourselves on fairly familiar ground conceptually, even though he hasn't been using these. He wasn't you talking about testimony before. He wasn't even talking about believing before when he was talking about abiding. But now we have that different approach to that same reciprocal situation there, right? Yeah, the ice with the accusative does suggest to me that the trusting in, Randall saying, a more active type of thing. Yes. See, again, in English, when we talk about believing in something, usually, I mean, sometimes it can be a statement of real investment. I believe in you, right? But um, I think to trust in or to trust into, it feels active to me too. With the accusative, it feels active to me. And so trusting seems much better than believing conceptually. To trust in something, to invest yourself in something. The trusting in the Son of God one. Before, the other couple times we've been talking about pisteuon, believing, trusting, in this paragraph and the paragraph before. We're all trusting that. Trusting that Jesus is the Christ, for instance. This is trusting into the Son of God, not just trusting that Jesus is the Son of God. It really does feel like he is here emphasizing exactly the kind of distinction that I want to see in pisteuon, in believing. Right? Again, that difference between acceding to the truth of a proposition and investing in something, relying upon it, acting on it. Is it one thing to believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and a further thing to believe into, to trust into the Son of God? It's not just an academic question. Is that Jesus of Nazareth the huion tu theou or not? But am I going to trust into, am I going to invest myself? Am I going to invest my assets in that, in this person? Because again, it's not even in a concept here. The object of the preposition, the into, is the Son, not the concept that Jesus is the Son. Yeah, the testimony surrounds the Son in the previous sentence. The testimony of God surrounds the Son. And the trust goes into the heart of the matter. Yeah, Randall, I agree. The trusting into the Son of God has the testimony in himself. Because if we trust into the Son of God, if we pour ourselves into, rely upon him, he is within us. And since he is surrounded by the testimony of God, the testimonious testimony of God, then that testimony, the breath, the truthiest testimony there is in us as well. The not trusting one, and we get nothing with trusting. We don't get halte, we don't get ice. It's just the verb on its own. The not trusting one, totheo psusten pepoiken. Oh, pepoiken. That's perfect tense of my poema. That's to make it be, right? No, wait, the dative, this isn't the dative with pisteon, is it? Isn't the dative going with pepoiken, making, with the making? You make God a liar. You make a liar of God. You make a liar of God. The direct object is psusten, accusative here. You make where does him fit in? Him is also accusative. Okay, no, auton. Well, then what's psusten? Psusten is accusative also. I'm confused. There seem to be two candidates for direct object here. Because you got to make something, right? Our Hoyoman word needs a direct object. So if you make him something, in this case a liar, those are both accusative? Okay, so it is pisteo on totheo then. I thought that was dative as an indirect object here with our direct objects, but no. Okay, right. You're speaking of the same thing. Him equals a liar. Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. You make him a liar. The one not trusting God. Okay, so in this case, then, if it's just pisteo on taking the dative, the not believing God one. That's funny. Okay, so the dative case is indirect objects. That's its most famous usage. Which means God is not the direct object of trusting. Not in a simple sense, in any case. See, this is where I was always dissatisfied. My, you know, like Latin teacher, I never took Greek, but my Latin teachers, would always just try to make me memorize. No, this verb takes the dative. But I'm like, why does it take the dative? Like, there's a reason why it takes the dative. Conceptually, we use believe with the accusative when we say, I don't believe you. You don't believe what? You. That's what I don't believe. You. But really, that's indirect because that's skipping a step, right? If you say to somebody, I don't believe you, what you really mean is, I don't believe that thing you said. I don't believe the thing that was said by you, is what you really mean. So conceptually speaking, the you is actually, it sounds like when we say, I don't believe you, it sounds like a direct object, but it isn't really a direct object. Not truly, not in the same sense as like, you know, I used the toaster. What did you use? The toaster. That's what I used. Right. Um, what I didn't believe was your breathing. That thing that you believe, that thing that you breathed. I didn't believe that. I didn't trust that. And so therefore, I don't trust in you. Indirectly. Conceptually, that seems to fit. So the one not trusting in God. Yeah. I No, I get that it's idiomatic. Again, my question is, so why the idiom? Why that idiom? Like what are they thinking when they do that? Why do they do that? What do those words reveal about how they think? That's my, that's my, that's what I'm always trying to figure out. And here in particular, what I'm interested in is what is the difference between pisteon to theo and pisteon eis ton huion? Believing into the accusative son as opposed to not believing the dative God. The one not trusting God has made perfect tense, completed action, a state that has been brought about. You've brought about the state of making him, causing him to be. Poiomen, that's the maker word. You have made him a liar. God, Mr. Truthful Testimony, you've made him a liar. Or rather, the not trusting God one with no preposition. It's hard to think that pisteon eis ton huion isn't stronger than pisteon to theo. Trusting God, trusting into the Son. It sounds much more active. The business about making him a liar clearly brings us back to his testimony. And indeed, that's where he's going, right? You has made him a liar in that he has not trusted ice 10, there it is again. Ice 10 martyrian in is not trusted into the testimony. Hen that he has testified, that God has testified surrounding his son. So, pisteo and totheo, the not believing God one. That sounds like that sounds like the more kind of generic sense. Like someone tells you something and you doubt it. Someone has given testimony and you're like, I don't believe his testimony. That's literally what he's going on to say. As a result of not trusting into the testimony that he has testified, you become a not trusting God one. I think, again, I don't want to just try to draw labored parallels to English usage because our usage is just different. But it's a little bit like believing and believing in. Like the difference between saying I believe you and I believe in you. If you don't believe in the testimony, then you don't believe him. Like, but if you do trust, I'm being inconsistent with belief and trust. It's hard for me to ignore the word that's actually on the page in front of me when I'm looking at it. Um, trusting into the Son of God and trusting into the testimony that God has testified testimoniously again. Notice those are the two parallel things, the two pisteo on ice phrases are the direct parallels. On the one hand, there's one person who trusts into the Son of God. And that person has God's testimony in himself. On the other hand, there's another person who has not trusted into the testimony that God has testified surrounding his son. And that person is a not believing God person. And that person has made God a liar. And I think the point here is not just that's a sort of a monstrous thing to do, to take the one whose breath is truth and to make him a liar. But it's not just monstrous, it's impossible. It's ludicrous. That is, the joke is kind of on you if you're trying to make God a liar. It's just a way of emphasizing how foolish it is not to trust into the testimony that God has testimoniously testified. Because the only way God has so testimoniously testified of it. He has so testimoniously testified this testimony that the only way you cannot believe him is to say that he's a liar. That the one whose breath is truth is a liar. That the water and the blood are liars as well. That they lied in what they testified to. Their testimony, which was presumably into one with the breath. But what I don't want to leave behind is having the testimony in himself. What does that mean? Again, it sounds very like, it's like another version of saying, we abide in God and God abides in us. But to have the testimony in yourself, if you believe into the Son of God, means what? What does that actually mean? See, it's interesting. Like the testimony is not, it's almost like the testimony becomes, I almost want to say an end to itself, if you see what I mean. That is that what he leads up to there is not the one believing in the Son of God is like one with the Son and the Father or whatever, right? Has the Father in him and he is in the Father, right? Um, I mean, that would make sense. That is, you'd think the testimony, God's testimony, would be the means to the end. Why did God testify surrounding Jesus, surrounding his Son? Well, so that we would trust into the Son, so that we would have fellowship with God and fellowship with the Son, that he who had the Father would have the Son also, and he who had the Son would have the Father also, and that if we abide in him, he would abide in us. But that isn't where he goes. The one believing in the Son of God has the testimony in himself. Okay. Why would I want the testimony? Don't I want the Son instead? What good is it to have the testimony in me? Does it mean that that I become the testimony when I believe into the Son? Do I experience the testimony in some way? Like I live God's testimony? Is it like a taste and see sort of thing? You can hear God's testimony, but if you really believe into it, you will experience the testimony. Maybe that's what he means by having it in himself. Now, you're not just taking God's word for it, even though God's word is very mega, right? But we're not, but you're not just taking God's word for it. Now you're experiencing it. And yeah, it's like a possession, Randall. Yeah, it has. Okay. You have it. It belongs to you. It's something that you've got now. The testimony. Yeah. It's And then again, he's imbalanced with it. Like he is the believing one and the not believing one. Whole pisteon, whole me pisteon, right? The believing, the not believing. So he starts off those two sentences directly parallel with each other, but then he doesn't end them parallel ways. Oh, but how do they correspond? Truth and testimony, lying and testimony. The believing one has the testimony in himself. Testimony now lives in you. You've got it. The not believing one has made God a liar. We get something. The believing ones get something. The not believing ones make something. They make God something. The believing ones, God acts on us. The not believing ones, they're attempting to act on God, making him something, which is the opposite of him, a liar. We, the believing ones, we don't make something. We have something. The testimony, the breath. The testimony is associated with all of those things that are doing with the breath and the water and the blood. And we have all of those things in us. And yes, you're right, Randall, that trying to make God out to be a liar is giving false testimony. But it's worse than just lying. I mean, it's complete delusion. We take into our hands the testimony of people, but we don't take God's testimony. We instead try to make him a liar. We delude ourselves. We forswear or delude or both ourselves into saying that God is a liar, that God's testimony is false. But if we believe into the Son, then we have the testimony in ourselves. En hauto. Not sure I understand that phrase in this context. In himself. It seems to be about internalizing. Has the testimony in himself. Huh. Hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure what to make of that exactly. Again, other than you don't have it just with you. You don't have it on you. You have it in you. Yeah, it's not just an external adornment. Not something you just hang out with or carry around. You incorporate it into you. You either take God's testimony into yourself or you try to make false testimony happen. Absurd, ludicrous false testimony. Because he has not believed into the testimony that God testified surrounding his Son. And I think the taking into having it in yourself. Gonna have to get back to like, why do you want the testimony per se? Why focus on having the evidence instead of having the thing that the evidence is of? And again, I think it's back to what is the testimony? Where did this all start? The water and the blood. The water, the blood, and the breath. These three things testify. Those are the testimony. The breath, the water, and the blood. And we have that testimony. That is a singular testimony as well as three testimonies in ourselves. We have the Spirit in ourselves, the breath. We have the breath of God in ourselves. We have the water. We have the blood. The breath of God that is truth. The water, the baptism, the cleansing, the repentance, things that baptism is associated with, especially John the Baptist's baptism, and the blood, Jesus' sacrifice, the propitiation. All of those things we have in ourselves if we believe into the Son of God. Or we try to make him into a liar. Okay. All right. Well, look at that. I went backwards, and yet we actually did two whole verses. Crazy. We did 9 and 10. Just going hog wild here in the new year. Okay. Tune in next time when we are told haute estin he martyria. And this is the testimony. And I'm guessing that's going to be followed by hoti. Oh, look, it is. Oh, and we're going to get Zoe. Oh, the life of the age. Oh, hang on. Okay. All right. Tune in next time for talking about the life of the age. And we'll see what's going on and why we're using this peculiar symbol in the middle of this sentence here. Very odd. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Happy New Year. And I will see you guys again soon. Bye now.